Hello, dear friends. It's Carly, and welcome to another episode of the I Learned podcast. Hello. I'm so glad that we are all here. I have had a wonderful morning so far, leading up to feeling ready to come in here and create this space where we get to use our minds and think about interesting things and expose ourselves maybe to a new perspective or a new insight that we hadn't thought of before. My favorite feedback that I've ever gotten about this podcast is that as this person was telling me that as they listened to me tell, they were talking about the story I told about my relationship with my mom and the healing that I'm working through around my mother wound. And by listening to that story, she was able to see herself and her mom and their relationship in a new light. And that somewhat she was able to let her mom off the hook a little bit. Excuse me. And that just felt really nice that I'm in this path of healing my own soul, my own wounds, my own karma, my own shit. When I started listening to Abraham, I got really clear about, like, I don't need negativity from anybody else because I have enough of my own, meaning my own practiced momentum that did not feel good. That's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is, like, where does that practiced negative momentum come from? And as you are probably aware, if you've been listening, if not, I do have a couple other episodes about human design. And that is what this episode is about as well, because that on Saturday, just a few days ago, when I very first discovered human design in depth, I've known about it for a couple of years. Saturday was the first day that I really took the time to dive into the 10,000 rabbit holes it took to make sense out of my human design chart, or any human design chart. And I got the hang of it on Saturday. It took 9 hours, but I did it. And it was so freaking worth it. It was so fun. It was the most fun I've had in a long time. So delicious and a totally free experience. So it also has helped me to settle into my inherent abundance, the fun of just getting to pass energy through my system and how abundant that feels, and settling more and more into my real abundance and how that has absolutely nothing to do with money. It's a spiritual abundance of alignment and fulfillment, of feeling your soul get to shine in the way that you knew you were coming here to be able to shine. We all had a reason. We all have a shine in mind, on a soul level. And we can get there by taking baby steps day after day towards what our soul wants from us. And a lot of times that means breaking out of practiced negative momentum that has guided probably a huge chunk of our lives. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the 9 energy centers that are part of the human design body graph. So this is another episode where, if you are going to listen to it and really want to get something out of it, I would highly recommend doing that at a time where you can sit with your unique human design chart in front of you. I think you'll get the most out of this episode, if that's the case. So by all means, take a second and use the link in the description to go get your free human design chart. And when you have that ready, press play and we're ready to rock and roll. So this is the second big piece. Like I said, I have a couple episodes on human design, a few episodes ago, over the incarnation cross, which was really the first piece that jumped out at me and really caught my attention and sold me on human design, and the accuracy of it. And this next piece is where my focus and interest and curiosity gravitated towards next, is the energy centers, the 9 energy centers. So these are a representation of the Kabbalah Tree of Life, or the chakras, which is not something that I am super familiar with, but I have heard about them, and I've had friends who were more into them, so they would like mention it in passing about chakras, and it just never really grabbed me to go and dive into it, so I didn't. No big deal. And then I hired my creative assistant, Maddie, who's writing my blog. If you haven't been over to the blog, highly recommend it. There's quite a few things on there at this point, which is very exciting. But Maddie is very into chakras. And so she was telling me some things about them that definitely piqued my curiosity a little bit, but still, I didn't really go look into it. And then I found human design. And because of human design, I now understand the chakra system, because I see how it fits in with everything else in astrology, and the I Ching, and all of these different just ancient practices of being able to know and understand ourselves. And this human design chart attempts to combine all of those pieces so that there's just one complete system of like, here's how your unique energy or your aura is wired to function. And our aura is just our energy, you know. We'll get into more defining that as we get into some of this material that I'm going to go through today, but yeah, it's very interesting to have an actual visual of how your unique energetic system is wired. So when we look at the 9 centers on the body graph is the person, like in the middle. It's also shaped like a triangle. And then it has the boxes or triangle shaped energy centers on there. Between all of those energy centers are all of the channels. Those are the lines that connect each energy center to the next energy center, and that network of connections is fixed for all of us. Like, we all have access to that same system of energy. And then based on where the planets were when you made your entry, that's what determines which of these channels are lit up for you. So you see that some of them are white, which means they're not activated for you. And some of those lines in between all the energy centers are black, some of them are red, and some of them are red and black striped. So all of that is saying this is how the planets activated all the possible energy system that's available. The ones that are lit up, that's what you're doing. That's what your energy is doing. The energy centers on the chart, any of them that are colored in, those are defined centers. That's a vocab word in human design when you're talking about energy centers, is defined or undefined. So if they're colored in, they're defined. If they're white, they're undefined, or open is another word, because really they're white. They're actually clear, like they're transparent, like they're empty. There's nothing there. And so that's the difference that I'm going to really spend some time with today, is like, if you have the center open, meaning you're going to take on energy from around you, you're going to soak up energy from the external world, and that's what's going to pass through your system. Or if the energy center is colored in, if it's defined, that means that it's fixed. You have your own source of energy in this space, and within you, that's defined. It's fixed. It's not changing. You don't take on influence from the outside world in those energy centers. It's a source of your energy. And so I'm going to go through each of the energy centers, each of the 9 energy centers, and we're going to talk about what does that specific energy center do in your body, in your energy field. It really is like think about a car. Like, all the pieces aren't the same. There's an engine, and there's a transmission, and there's an alternator, and there's a on and on and on. There's a battery. None of those pieces are the same piece, but it takes all the pieces to make the whole thing work. So there is a holistic system represented by like these 9 energy centers that splits out the holistic system and shows you exactly where is each piece happening, which I thought was fascinating, which is all this chakra system. This Kabbalah Tree of Life system. And so we're going to go through each of the 9 centers. So this is why, having your chart in front of you, you can see, is your center in each case, is it defined? Is it colored in? Or is it open? Is it white? So we'll go through each one and we'll talk about what that actually means. Let me see here. So before we go through each one, I do have a couple notes on just centers in general and like the overall system, the overall energetic system, and how it's wired for each of us. So the centers the centers are where we receive and transform the energy or life force that circulates through the energetic system. So that's what the centers are doing. It's deciding, where does that energy come from and what does it look like when it passes through your system? And then to have a center be defined, so those centers that are colored in on your chart, that just means that when you look at those colored in centers, between the colored in centers, there will be a channel or a line that is all the way colored in. So that means that the entire channel is activated from one center to the next center. And because of that, those 2 centers become defined. So that means that you're flowing energy successfully between those 2 centers. You're generating energy and moving it to another place in your body. And really, I thought this was interesting, is that all of the energy in your body, regardless of the center, is moving towards, it's trying to make its way towards your throat center, because that is your center of manifestation. That's your center of basically getting what you want. I wrote a blog post, speaking of the blog, head over there and check it out if you haven't. But I wrote a blog post about these drunken noodles that I had at this Thai restaurant one time, because I asked if I could have it, even though the menu said I couldn't. I asked if I could, and they said yes. That's why the throat is the center of manifestation, because you can have all the ideas, you can have all the physical energy it takes to get the job done. But if you're not willing to like put yourself out there and declare to yourself and the universe what you want, you can't have it. So I thought it was fascinating that that's how this system works, is that all of the energy in our systems is trying to get to our throat where it can express and become what we want. So that I thought was very fascinating. So your throat is defined and most powerful when you have a channel of energy connected from one of your motor centers. So we'll go through the 4 motor centers and your throat. So that means you generate energy and it moves successfully to your throat or your manifestation center, and you manifest what you want. So again, all of this is tied together with everything we've been talking about with law of attraction, with our emotional intelligence and our emotional guidance system, and turning inward towards paying attention to how we feel. This is just one more way to understand our unique energetic system. So open centers, the opposite of defined. So if the center is white or clear or empty, that's an open center. And this is where we take on conditioning. Conditioning is another vocab word in human design, and it just means that we are receiving energy. Our center is open. There's no creation of energy happening inside us in that center. So that means it's open for any energy that we come into contact with to be soaked up into that center. And That's called conditioning in human design. And this is, again, where we're talking about practiced negative momentum. Conditioning in general has a negative context around it, where it is generally assumed to be a bad thing, because what ends up happening is that we take on energy from, typically from people who have a defined center in that space. And so they're generating energy in that space. And then we take it on as our own if we have an open center. And now we have their energy inside of us, and we are operating from a space of like using their energy instead of honoring our true self. And, basically in human design, this is called our not self. When we're conditioned from the outside to be a certain way because we have an open center, we're taught how to be instead of honoring what that open center means. And then we make decisions and we align ourselves with our not self. And so that's a theme in your human design, is like an emotion to watch for. When you have that not self emotion, that means that you are making decisions in alignment with your conditioning and not with who you really are. So all of this, I feel like all of this is such the piece that I've been reaching for to tie together Abraham and science and astrology and like all of these things that I've learned these last several years. Human design, I think, is this cherry on top that just pulls it all together, and it's just delicious. Let me see if there's, I think that's about it as far as what I wanted to say on centers overall. So next, like I said, I'm going to go through all 9 of the centers. And for the sake of ease, I'm just going to start at the top of the head where that top triangle is, and I'm going to work down. That's going to mix together all of the pressure centers and motor centers and awareness centers. Like all of these centers have a different function, like I said. So we're going to mix it all together and do them one at a time. And for ease, we'll just start at the top and work our way down. So the very top triangle is our head or crown center. The head is one of the 2 pressure centers. The other pressure center is the root. It's the very bottom one. And this is where inspiration comes from. This is the fuel that gives our mind the inspiration of what to think about, what to ponder about, what to reach for, what questions to try to answer, what are we trying to make sense of. The mind is those 2 top triangles. So the mind is split into those 2 parts, and the head center, which is the top one, is the one that's giving you the inspiration and direction and questions. And then the ajna, or the second one, and we'll go through this one in more detail in a second, is how you would answer those questions, and like the thinking mind and how you're figuring out what you're pointed towards. But what you're pointed towards is a whole different thing, and that's your head center. So the head center, like I said, it's a pressure center, and it is applying mental pressure. So it is where we're, looking out at the world around us, and we have a mental awareness of the world around us. And because of that, we can decide, like in our mind, the inspiration can come through that, I want a bigger house. I want to lose weight. I want to, whatever you want to do, like this inspiration is trying to come through your mental pressure center. And that's when, you start putting mental pressure on yourself. Like, I need to lose weight. I need to eat better. I'm so fat. I need to get this off me. Like, I don't like the way I look. Like that's mental pressure that's coming in, probably from an open head center where you're looking around at the rest of the world and you're constantly optimizing yourself to live up to what you see out there. So there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of potential in the world. There's so many things. And like with an open head center, so like if your head center is white, that very top triangle, if it's white, you're constantly taking on inspiration from everywhere around you. And you guessed it, that can be really overwhelming. That can be really a lot and almost paralyzing if you're not having some type of inner process of discernment to figure out, like, out of all of these countless options, which one of these is right for me. So that is a different process. So if those two processes aren't working together very well, there's a great potential for a lot of mental pressure coming through unnecessarily, which can create anxiety. It can, create loops of negative self-talk. Being aware of that head center and the pressure that you are putting on your own internal mind, that's a game changer, right? Like basically the open center, like signpost of what to watch for when it's running awry, when it's running away from you in a way that this is not going to go well for you. When it comes to the head center, it's thinking about things that don't matter. So most likely thinking about somebody else or something that somebody else said or something that somebody else is working towards or their goals or their achievements. And you're trying to figure out, how do I become what I see outside of myself? It's that mental pressure of I need to be different. I need to change. And we concern ourselves with other people's examples. And that all sounds really negative, like shit, my head center's open and it's a lost cause and I'm just doomed for the rest of my life. And you know that that's not the podcast we're on. So Carly has an answer for this, at least one that helps me to feel better. You can take it or leave it like always, but I think it's really beautiful that Abraham has the analogy that like life is like a buffet. The diversity of what we see in life is like a buffet. And when you go through a buffet, which you may or may not do, and if you don't, for whatever reason, then just go with me in theory here. But when you go through a buffet and you see something that you don't like I don't like deviled eggs, I would never stop in my tracks and demand that the deviled eggs be taken off the buffet. Right now, I can't even continue until these deviled eggs come off this buffet. No, that would never happen. You would just not get a deviled egg. You would just not put it on your plate. But again, that depends on a process of discernment. Like if I see something on a buffet and it's deviled eggs, but I don't know what deviled eggs is. I've never had it. I have no experience with it. So I get one and I put it on my plate and I take it back to the table and I take a bite of it and I gag and throw it back up on my plate because it's disgusting. No offense if you like deviled eggs. And then I'm mad because how the hell are they going to put deviled eggs on that buffet? Why would they put this out there? It's disgusting. No. No. Just don't get it next time. Now you know. That's how discernment works. You taste what you don't like, and now you know that you don't like it. So don't get it next time. That's that process of discernment. So with any of these open centers, it is about building up a process of discernment. And when you read, like you could Google any of these, like if your head center is white on your chart, so we know it's open. So you could Google open head center human design, and it would give you all kinds of support and guidance and explanation and journal prompts and self-awareness reflection prompts and all of that, to help you see when your head center is getting out of whack, right? So there is brilliance in our open centers. They're said to be our greatest source of wisdom and potential, like here in this physical experience. So there is absolutely value in learning and mastering each of our open centers and being aware of what it sounds like when it's getting all crazy, because you're soaking up things outside of yourself, which is a superpower in some part, but at the same time, if you're not in control of it, it can get away from you, and that's not good. It can wreak havoc in your energetic system. especially that head center, because it's a pressure system. So if it's open and you're soaking up ideals and inspiration that are other people's, and without discernment, forcing those pressures, those directions on yourself because you should, it sounds like a lot of shoulds. I should do this. That's a good sign that you've soaked up that inspiration from outside of yourself, and that mental pressure system can put pressure and stress on all of your system from there as you try to live up to this thing that's not really yours. The magic of these open centers, and again, this is really what caught my attention with this piece of human design. So open centers are where we absorb energy from outside of us and amplify it. That is a one in one, like it happens all together, is that you take it in and you amplify it. So any of these open centers, you're soaking up that energy from outside of yourself and you're amplifying it. And this is reminding me of when I was little, and my dad would, he was a very vocal person. When he was frustrated or upset or aggravated or anything, he gave it words. It came out of his mouth, and he just moved on with his life. And I didn't like that because I felt like I was soaking up that negativity and that anger and frustration and tension, and then I was amplifying it. And I was trying to, like, I remember multiple times trying to tell my mom like how upset he was, and that's why it was making me upset. And she's like, just let it go. Just let it roll off your back. Like, it doesn't matter. He's fine. Like, he didn't mean any of that. And I'm just sitting there like, wait, what? And I think now I know that that's because I have all of these open centers. So not only did I soak up everything he put out, but I amplified it. And I knew that this feels really bad. Like, this does not feel good. And I was like the canary in the coal mine of like, this is bad feeling energy. And my mom's like, no, it's fine. No, it was really bad feeling energy. But at the same time, I'm also remembering, with this whole like open centers take in energy and they magnify it, where I took a 7-day Abraham cruise to Alaska, and it was a magical week. It was the most magical week of my life, living on that cruise ship for 7 days. I went by myself, so I knew no one on the cruise ship, and I made so many friends. I was constantly in the right place at the right time. I had a little group of friends by the time I left, and I did that in 7 days. And I moved to Dallas. It took me over a year, like 15 months to try to make friends. And on the Abraham cruise, I did it in a week. So yeah, it's like whatever energy you're subjecting yourself to, you're soaking it up and you are making it bigger. So if you are surrounding yourself by people who feel like sunshine, you feel like sunshine. You are taking in and amplifying sunshine. So it is even more important. The more open centers you have, the more important it becomes to surround yourself with people who only feel good. And if they don't feel good, go away from them, because as soon as they turn into a not good feeling place, like, you are constantly soaking up energy from people and making it bigger. So really, you're not helping them by staying close to them, because you're amplifying their discomfort. You're amplifying their dissatisfaction. So I feel like the best gift I can do is to stay away from people while they don't feel good. And when they feel better, get back together with them and amplify that for them. So yeah, it's about understanding like those open centers and the way our energy interacts with other people. So that's that head center. Yes. The next part of the mind, the second triangle, the one that's kind of pointing down, is the ajna, or the third eye. And this is one of the 3 awareness centers. So this is our mental awareness. This is where we conceptualize and answer questions. So coming off of the head, the inspiration, the things that we point ourselves towards, the ajna then takes over and turns it into a practical approach. Like, okay, so how are we actually going to get from point A to point B? This is also like where your thoughts are. So this is the place where, and we've talked about like perception. Perception matters. Perception is everything. And really, perception lives in these two centers, in the head center and the ajna center, where these centers are coloring everything else that's going on in our entire system for the most part. Like things that come in, they collide with our ideas about things, about the world, about ourselves, and a response happens. And our emotional response is about that. Our so many reactions in our system have to do with what are we holding in those two centers? What are our ideas about life and the world and ourselves? So if we have a belief, or we have, an idea in our mind that we are not lovable, or we're ugly, or nobody likes us, when we look at the world, that's what we see. And when someone walking down the street, you smile at them and they don't smile back, you take it personally and you see that, well, they only did that because I'm ugly or I'm not lovable or whatever. And now you're having an emotional response where your feelings are hurt because that person didn't smile back at you. But if you don't hold that belief and you smile at someone on the street and they don't smile back, you don't think twice about it. So it's like that. It's like life is what it is, but how we look at it and our relationship to ourselves and to the world colors everything. So this is where we mold our beliefs. This is where we lean in a positive direction. This is where we practice gratitude so that our awareness in our heads and our thoughts, our awareness is that life is good. Everything is always working out for me. And when I look around my world, that's what I see. I see that things are working out for me. So that's where, if that's something that you're working on, is like shaping your beliefs. And especially if these centers are open for you, it's important to really be intimately familiar with your beliefs and bring your discernment to which of these beliefs is serving me and like serving my soul's purpose specifically, and which of these beliefs did I pick up along my trail, and did somebody teach me? One such belief for me, just to give you an example, is that you have to work really, really hard, like 20 hours a day, really, really hard, 7 days a week, really, really hard. If you want to build a business that's successful, that's how you have to do it. You have to work really, really hard. And if you don't work really, really hard, then you're pretty much lazy. You're not good. You're less than. You're all of these things. That was kind of the energy that I was marinated in my early years, was this idea of hard work. And I'm not built for hard work, which is a story for another day. And so now, like anytime I start to feel the mental pressure of I should work harder, I recognize this is not mine. This is something that somebody tried to teach me and tried to put consequences around how hard I worked and incentives around how hard I worked, and tried to teach me that that's how value is. And so now I'm somewhat deprogramming myself to, that's not how value works for me. That's not how I define value in my internal system. For me, feeling rested and inspired and happy and having fun in my day, those are all things, and there's so many more that rank above how hard I'm working. Actually, like I try really hard not to work hard. Like that's kind of my main focus, but again, a story for another day. So that is where beliefs that were given to us can cause us to make decisions that don't really align with who we are. And that's what leads to practiced negative momentum, is because we are making decisions out of sync with who we really are. So that's where, learning how to master your open centers, this is what it looks like. This is what that process actually looks like is, okay, so I have open head and ajna centers, which I do. And that means that I had a highly conditioned set of beliefs because I had no defense against picking up whatever my environment had to offer to me. That is what it is. And then later, after all the years of depression and anxiety and all of that, trying to live up to this prescribed set of beliefs, I found Abraham, where she teaches that really the way you feel should be your guiding light, not anything that anybody ever told you was a rule or anything like that. And I was like, okay, that makes sense because I don't feel very good. So here, let me see if I can feel better. And 5 years practicing what Abraham teaches of paying attention to the way I feel like I am rooting out those beliefs that weren't really mine to begin with. Those belong to somebody else. And yeah, it wasn't meant to be mine. And now I get to decide what beliefs feel good in my system, and I get to amplify the energy of the beliefs that I choose. And that's what I do on this podcast. Every single episode is like I give airtime to the things that I think are fun and important and good to learn and are things that have made a positive difference for me, just like what we're doing here. So those are the two head centers. The throat, we talked a little bit about that. So that's that square box right below, right on the throat. That this is our manifestation center. So we only have one manifestation center. And that is why all of the energy in our system is eventually trying to work its way towards the throat so that the energy that's flowing through you can be channeled into creating something. Like really the life force of our soul, the whole reason we come forward is to create ripple effects out into the universe, create evolution, create more. So we all are creating something very different as far as the more that we're working towards, but the throat and being able to say out loud what is the more that you're wanting to create is the main key to being able to create it. So if you have a defined throat center, that just means that you have a defined, practiced method of manifesting what you want. And if you do not have a defined throat center, so if it's open, if it's white, that means that you do not have a consistent way of manifesting what you want. And not that you can't, just like the head centers, where it's a matter of working towards, like, basically when you have an open center, you're going to try on a lot of different options, hopefully, and you're going to find the one that works for you. So you're going to try it this way, like this person, and that doesn't really fit. And then you're going to try it like this way, like this person, and that doesn't really fit. Then you're going to try it like this way, like this person, and that doesn't really fit. And it takes a little bit longer to get there with your abilities to like do what you're wanting to do. Like whichever center we're working in, it takes longer to get to where you've mastered it. But again, that's where our wisdom, that's where our potential comes from, because in those open centers is where we learn discernment, because we try on all of these different options and we learn what doesn't work. So by the time we get to what does work, we really know our shit. We know exactly why that works because we've tried all these other ways and we know the ins and outs of how our system functions. So there's such big potential in our open centers. I hope that when you look at your open centers, you see potential and not just the anxiety causing little things that they can be, especially early on. I'm going to pause here and reset just because I know we're going to take longer than the 60-minute recording, and I will be back shortly. Okay, so we will move on to the G, or identity center. So this is the diamond-shaped one just below the throat center, kind of at the very, very center of the body graph. And this center represents the self, as in your sense of self, your sense of love, and direction. And if this center is open, that means that you are Like the behavior to watch out for if you have this center open is that you're fixated on finding love and a sense of direction, meaning that you're looking really hard outside of yourself for these things. So a lot of times a practice of self-love can really bring your awareness back into all of the gifts and everything that you already have inside of yourself, that like basically you're already loved. You're already loved by source. You're already connected with yourself. You're already like taking care of yourself, and that there's a start of an identity in that. And from there, that can grow into whatever else is important to you, because that sense of direction, that can be a tough one to have open. If you have that center defined, that basically means that you have a set sense of your own self and direction, meaning like you know who you are, you know where you're trying to get to, maybe not specifically at first, maybe more generally, but you're very, very certain about being able to get there and all of that. So if this center is open, that means that kind of like the throat center where we talked about, you're going to try on different ways of manifesting. With your open identity center, you could try on different identities. I think about like my identity center is open, and when you look back through my relationship history, it's hard to believe that the same person dated all of these people because the people are so different. Like they all are unique. Like there really isn't a type. And I think that makes a lot of sense considering my open identity center. I like mixing with lots of different people, and I've figured out, like early on, I would absolutely compare myself to other people. And I think there's maybe a sense of inferiority with that open center, like early on for me. But as I've grown and gotten a handle on this center being open, it's actually like a really great superpower, because I look at everyone's identity and I pick and choose like which pieces work for me. And my open identity center means that my identity is fluid. And if ever a piece of my own identity is no longer working for me, I shed it and I get a new identity. Like I just evolve. And so, I mean, there's a lot of evolution capable in these open centers. So again, going back to, they are our source of wisdom and potential, and so much potential for evolution of our soul happening through our open centers. In this one though, I do think it's interesting because, kind of like I said, like if you have this center defined, you just have a really good understanding of where you're going and what your life is for and who you are. And it is worth mentioning that, like, for me, I have this center open, but I also have 4 gates activated in this center. And I haven't talked about that yet, but like, basically the activated gates on your body graph are the ones that are circled and highlighted in like that bluish purple color. An activated gate is just, that's how you're connecting it back to where the planet was when you were born. So like the gates are fixed and the planets are moving around, and wherever they landed when you were born, those are the gates that got activated. And so like in my identity center, it's not defined, meaning none of those gates are connected to any of my other energy centers, but I do have 4 of them activated. And while I've never had like a really strong vision or identity or like sense of direction, like a very specific one, I feel like I have had a pretty general idea. Like I've known my entrepreneurial spirit. I've known that I want to be a trailblazer and go into uncharted territory. I know that I love public speaking. I want to do that. So like there's been a general sense of my identity being built from very early on. But like the public speaking piece is a perfect example of, I didn't learn that about myself until I was like 7. So even that, which feels like it's been with me my whole life, it really wasn't. That was something that I figured out about myself. So that's that open identity center. You're going to figure out stuff about yourself as you go along. As you experience different things, you'll see your identity in those experiences, and you'll get to pick and choose which pieces work for you and which ones do you want to just leave on the buffet for somebody else, which is totally fine. So that identity center, it basically like sets our direction, and it does that. It's different than the head center, which is our inspiration, which also kind of sets our direction. The identity center works kind of the opposite. It attracts people, places, and things from the outside world to us. Whether the identity center is fixed or open, it's attracting cooperative components to us so that we can live out our destiny. So the more clear we are on our identity and our G center, our like, who are we and what are we here for, the more cooperative components will be attracted into us. So again, that's whether it's colored in or white, defined or open, either way, it's attracting. The next one we're going to do is kind of off to the right of the identity center, and it's the only one that's a little triangle. So it's smaller than the other triangles. It only has 4 gates or 4 numbers on it. And basically, real quick, since we didn't talk about gates yet, gates are doorways into the energy centers. That's why, like we said, like you have to have a whole channel of energy between 2 centers to define those 2 centers. So that means like gate to gate, it's lit up. So like if you look at 2 centers that you have that are colored in, and then find the line between them that is totally colored in. There may be one, there may be more than one. That is that defined channel of energy. So you look at the gates on either end of that, and find those are the 2 gates that were activated. That creates the channel of energy that's totally colored in. And that means I have these 2 centers defined in my chart. So we're looking at the heart center now, only 4 gates. So, I mean, it seems like that one has the lowest chance of being defined just because there's only 4 doorways to get in there, which I think is interesting because, that's our heart. So we're gonna, so this is one of the motor centers. We talked about there's pressure centers, motor centers, and awareness centers. So this is one of the 4 motor centers, is the heart. It is our ego and our willpower. It's our ability to do something because we said we would do it. I was thinking about marriage actually when I was looking at this, and thinking like, I wonder if your heart center is defined, you have an easier time staying married, versus if your heart center is open, you would be more likely to get divorced if the relationship went south. I don't know. That's just a wondering that I had, an inspiration through my head center. I'm sure life will provide the answer at some point. So it's also like our ability to keep promises. And basically, if you have an open heart center, you're better off not making promises in the first place, because what that means is that at any given point, your willpower will be dependent on whatever else is happening in your energy system. It's very inconsistent. So you may or may not have the willpower to keep the promise that you made. And I know with my open heart center, I have had much guilt about not keeping the promises that I made. Like that's why when I did get engaged, it was so hard to cancel the wedding because I felt so guilty about breaking the promise. I said I would marry him, and now I'm calling it off. Like I felt terrible about that, but I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. So yes, I said I would marry you, but that was 8 months ago. This is today, and I don't want to anymore. So it's like that, an open heart center. Not saying you can't find someone that you wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life with. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying you're going to try on a lot of different options. right? Just like any of the other open centers, you're going to find your own limits with your willpower, and you're going to learn how to live within them. You're going to make promises that you can keep because you have an experience with making promises that you couldn't keep. So it's, again, going back to that process of discernment. When you have it open, the behavior to watch out for is, do I think I have something to prove? Which a lot of times making promises and getting married, like that was what I was doing. Like I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing by getting married. And in the end, I didn't want to, so I didn't do it. But I was going to, like, for quite a while. I had it in my head that this is what you do, so this is what I'm going to do. And oh God, yeah, I'm glad that didn't end up working out. And with that, so the motor centers, they are all different, all slightly different, in how they produce the energy that you need to get stuff done. So when it comes to the heart center, that sense of willpower and your ego, that is a pulse motor, is what they call it, which basically means it's on and off. So even if it is defined, that means that it's really only creating energy for short-term goals. Like you're not going to do something for the rest of your life with your willpower. And I mean, if you've ever tried to do a diet or exercise plan, or like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in a month, and like, yeah, how'd that work out? How often are you actually able to do that? Because the willpower, it's good for a couple days and then it dries up. So, and probably if you have a defined heart, maybe your willpower is a little bit stronger than someone with an open heart. But still, it's not intended to be sustainable energy that can carry you day after day after day after day after day. So that's good to know. That's good to know that that's really not, it's not meant to do that, the heart energy. The next one I'm going to do, so if you drop down below the diamond shaped one, there is a square. There's actually two squares. So that's that very next one. Not the very bottom one, just the next square, is the sacral center. And this one is also a motor center. And unlike the heart, this is sustainable energy. If you can get this center activated and working, it is sustainable generative energy that will carry on forever. Once it's activated, it stays on. So that's interesting. That this is that deeper calling, that deeper why, like in the heart, in the ego, it's a short-term gain. It's a short-term burst of energy that can get you over this tiny little hump. But in the sacral center, it's the energy, the long-term energy to create what your life force is all about. It's like, what is your soul here for? And what is the daily energetic action that you can take every day to move more and more and more towards creating what your soul came forward to create. So that is a powerful source of energy. And anytime we ever talk about connecting with our why, we're dipping down into that sacral place where we're really asking ourselves, like, what is it that our soul wants? Why do I want what I want? And so often what we want it because we want to be happy. We want to feel better, yada, yada, yada. So again, connecting with the most basic version of why do you want what you want? That's how you activate that deep, sustainable energy that can carry out for the rest of your life. So that would be like the difference between a diet that's coming from ego that's saying like, I want to be skinnier, I want to look better. And now the diet lasts for 2 weeks and I lose 5 pounds and now I'm done. I'm over it. Versus like, I want to be healthy. My body is a temple and I want to treat my body with self-respect and I want to honor my physical form for all of the great things that it does for me. Now I'm building a lifestyle from a sacral place of really having that deep importance of honoring myself. And that is very different. That's a lifestyle versus a diet. So that sacral place, it's also responsible for our sexuality. And when it's open, we run into the issue of not knowing when enough is enough. I also have this center open and it makes so much sense because I I find things and I get obsessed with them and I chew all the flavor out of the gum. And usually I overdose on it just a little bit and then I'm over it and I don't want to do it ever again. So like that's somewhat of my cycle, especially when I was younger, especially think like alcohol. Like I have a whole list of alcohols I can't drink because I threw it up that one time that I drank way too much of it. And then I couldn't drink vodka anymore. Then I couldn't drink rum anymore. Then I couldn't drink blah, blah, blah anymore. And now I can't drink liquor because there's nothing left because I overdosed on all of that. And I had to put it behind me because like I can't ingest it anymore because my sacral center is like, ooh, this is nice. Let's have some more. Ooh, this is nice. Let's have some more. And once it's activated, it's on, right? So I don't know how to turn it off. Like that sacral energy being open. One of the things that I read was people with an open sacral center, they need to go to bed before they're tired because you basically don't know when you're tired. You have very little awareness of your body and knowing like when you've hit your limits. So it gets really easy to just blow right past your limits and overdo on whatever it is that you're pointed towards, which that definitely resonated for me. So, and that's something that I practice is, well, and actually the wisdom of this open sacral. So like, what are you working towards? It's like you're here to teach what it looks like to pace yourself in a really good feeling way. Like because you've overdone it so many times, you've found your limitations and now you know what your desired pace is. And for me, my desired pace is slow and fun. That's what I'm trying to do. And fun today and fun tomorrow and fun the next day. And so a saying that I practice that I think is tied to this open sacral of trying to like find my limits and find this place of balance and pacing myself. I say, well, you know what? That's enough fun for today. That'll just be fun for another day. If there's more still that I want to know. Like on Saturday when I was learning human design and it had been 9 hours, I quit because my body was like so tense and excited. And I just like, I was so full. I was like over full that it's now taken me 3 days to come back to it because my body needed to recover because I overdosed on this exciting energy of getting to learn. So yeah, open sacral means it's going to be easy to overdo those limits and that the wisdom is the discernment of knowing our own limits and being able to quell our own excitement and regulate that energy into tomorrow. Realizing that if you find something that you're deeply passionate about that's sparking your soul's purpose, it'll still be there tomorrow. And that, you know, if you burn up your whole system, you can't do anything tomorrow. So like you might as well take it easy today and live within your energetic limits. And then tomorrow you'll have energy to do it again and live within your energetic limits. And then the next day you'll have energy to do it again. So it's like that. Learning how to pace ourselves is an art form if you have an open sacral center. So there's that one. So I have a few more to go through. Not that you need to know this, but I have a meeting right now. So I'm going to pause my recording and I'll be back to finish up and then we'll be ready to rock and roll. All right. So we'll finish up with our last 3 centers. So we just completed the sacral center. So that is that square one. So now we'll do the triangles on either side of that. So if you do that left triangle, that is the spleen, the splenic center. And that is an awareness center. And it is to help us survive. So there's body consciousness that lives in our spleen. So this one is actually just clicking in the moment, but like I have terrible balance. I have like a really big fear of heights if I'm not like strapped into something, just because all the time, I just like for no good reason, just like fall over. I'd say like I can trip standing still. Like my body awareness, not great. And this center happens to be open for me. So I do wonder out loud if there's any correlation between that. But your splenic center is also controlling your immune system and your intuition. So that body awareness, like if you do have a defined splenic center, so if that left triangle is colored in for you, that means that your body knows things and is telling you its knowledge. And then within the context of your larger system, you get to decide what you do with that. If you do have an open splenic center, the behavior to watch out for is holding on to what's not good for you. So I saw examples of this a lot around relationships. Like if you're in a relationship that isn't ideal, you basically have a really high tolerance to put up with things that are not good for you. I think it was also this one that said, like, you can fall into addiction or substance abuse really easily if this is open, again, because you don't have a defined sense of your own body's energy. So knowing that something is damaging your body or good for your body, it doesn't come really naturally to you. So kind of like the other open centers, you're going to try out a lot of different things, and you're going to learn through trial and error what works for your body and what doesn't, and how to be in your body in a way that feels good. So we'll flip over to that right triangle on the other side, and that is our solar plexus. So this one is unique in that it is a motor center. It creates energy for us to get stuff done, and it's an awareness center. And the solar plexus as a whole is about your emotions, your emotional energy. So in terms of it being a motor center, things that tug at your heartstrings, so to speak, things that touch you emotionally can motivate you to get things done. Also, this is where our emotional intelligence lives. So this solar plexus region is also where we're picking up on emotional energy from others. We're reading and sensing emotional states in everything that we come into contact with. In terms of it being a motor, though, it called it a wave motor. So unlike like the sacral center was a motor, and once it was activated, it's on forever. The solar plexus isn't like that. It's a wave. So it'll come and the wave, runs its course, and then the wave is over. And now there's no wave, and you're waiting for the next wave of emotion. So the trick with that is learning how to ride the waves of your emotion. If that's the energy that you're counting on to get stuff done, then when you feel the wave of energy move through you, the wave of emotional energy move through you, you take action right now, because you understand that, like, this energy isn't coming when I ask it to come. It's coming in a wave whenever it's inspired to move through me. So take advantage of it while you have it. Capture the energy as it moves through, versus like, this isn't a place that I think is easy to stimulate on purpose. You kind of got to take what you're given and work with what you got. If you have this center open, the behavior to watch out for is avoiding confrontation and your own truth. And this, I'll be honest, I found a little bit confusing, because I have this center defined and I'm the first one to avoid confrontation. And this year I set my mantra as the year of speaking truth, because I also, to some extent, avoid speaking my truth. So I do wonder, like, when centers are defined, all that means is that it's fixed, and you have a fixed way of dealing with the energy in that center. And so, like, for me, when I was little, I was taught that emotional outbursts are unbecoming. That's bad behavior, and you need to knock that shit off. So I taught myself not to have these emotional outbursts. So I avoided confrontation. I internalized those emotional outbursts and I kept it from disrupting my interactions with other people. And so, in that regard, even though I have it defined and it's a fixed system for dealing with that energy, I was suppressing that energy. I wasn't letting it flow. So, just because you have a center defined doesn't mean that you aren't going to still have work to do in those centers to be at your healthiest, to allow the energy to flow and find that harmony in your own system. It also said that the solar plexus it's one of our places where we experience our consciousness. It's our consciousness of our spirit. So the solar plexus is spirit consciousness and our emotional intelligence. The spleen is our body consciousness, and the head is our mental consciousness, I do believe. So those are our three places where we experience our consciousness and relate to other people's consciousness. So our solar plexus is literally like where, we get a sense of our soul. We get a sense of leaning into our soul and what does our soul want from us. And so much of our talk around emotions and emotional intelligence is about those are messages from our soul, like those emotional energies that move through us are letting us know if we're moving in the direction of our soul or our inner being, or if we're moving away. So it made total sense to me that the solar plexus was this spirit consciousness. That our soul somewhat lives in that solar plexus region and is sending us signals to let us know how on track we are with doing what our soul wants us to do. That information is coming through our emotions. All of that tracked with what I felt like I already knew. So the last of the 9 energy centers is the root, the one at the very base of the body graph. And this is the second pressure center, like we talked about with the head being the first pressure center. The root is the other one. So like on either end of the system, pressure can be introduced, and pressure is ultimately there to help us survive and thrive and live up to our highest potential. So pressure all by itself, not a bad thing. But if we're not aware of that pressure and we're letting it run rampant all over us like a bulldozer, then it can turn problematic. It can distract us from living up to our highest potential when it's actually there to do exactly the opposite. It's there to help us with that. So this root center, so pressure centers fascinate me all by themselves. And I really want to do a whole episode just on the pressure centers, the head center and the root center, and the different kinds of pressure that we experience and how to cope with that, how to talk yourself out of it, how to recognize it in the first place. There's just so much meat on that bone to even just talk about those two. But anywho, so the root is our second pressure center. It's also one of the motor centers. So it's the fourth of the 4 motor centers. And it is also a pulse motor, a lot like the heart center. So that means that it's not going to sustain you for the rest of your life, basically. This pulse motor is really tied to your adrenaline system. So something that gets your adrenaline pumping will cause your body to move without you ever having to consciously think and decide that you want your body to move. Your body will move all by itself. Example being, you see a lion running at you. You don't think about it, you turn around and you run away. And that is that adrenaline that pumps through you that is trying to help you survive this interaction with this lion. And that adrenaline is tied directly to your root center, which will put your body in motion and you're running before you ever meant to run. So it's like that. It's that body energy to do what you need to do. But that adrenaline, we're not meant to live in a constant state of adrenaline. We're meant to be at rest sometimes and in motion sometimes. So that's why it's a pulse motor. It's not a consistent, sustainable energy. The root center is also responsible for stress hormones. So because of that imperative for survival, this center senses that danger and will create the stress hormones that your body needs to put you in motion to do the action that you need to do to, avoid or resolve the stress. If you have an open root center, basically it said like you're always in a hurry to be out from under pressure. And it went on one article I read to say something like, but when you have an open root center, you're basically always under pressure. Like you resolve one thing and then you're like, there's just a new thing. There's just a new, pressure that's on you that you need to do something that you don't want to do. And there's pressure and you need to do it and all of that. So, the goal, I think, of an open root center, kind of like the open sacral center, it's about pacing yourself and finding your speed, not the speed of everybody else, because so many of us are comparing ourselves to people with defined root centers, defined sacral centers, like those defined motor centers, where especially if they have all four motor centers defined, they are working like a workhorse, like all day, every day. They have that energy. It's just in them. It's just coming out of them. And then those of us with open motor centers are trying to work that hard, and that's going to set us up for failure every single time. That's where burnout comes from. That's where crashing comes from, because when you have an open root center, that means that your physical energy to get the stuff done, it's inconsistent at best. And that you have to figure out, like, how do I maximize? Like, what can I do that helps me maximize my physical energy? Like, I've been talking about, like, I haven't had alcohol in 8 days and I've been doing yoga for the last 6 days, and I'm trying to build these habits because I've noticed my body and my physical energy feels better when I'm doing these things. So I have an open root. That means my energy is very inconsistent, but I do know that there are things that I can do that will help to produce more energy in my system that I can then use to do what I need to do. But I know that if I don't do those things, then my energy goes down. If I drink, my energy goes down. Like I know that that's true. And so knowing that doesn't mean that I have to live one way or the other, but it is interesting, especially looking at my human design chart with all of these open centers. It is interesting to see that there are ways to optimize my system, and that when I take certain actions and when I invest my time in certain ways, like to, carve out the time to do yoga, for example, that's creating harmony in my system. And that when I create that harmony in my system, then my system is more harmonious and it's nicer to live in. So open centers are like that. Like, I think there's some extra work required on the front end of like figuring it out and figuring out, where do I fit in this world of infinite possibilities? It's a process of figuring that out and discerning what works for you out of the whole buffet of options. Versus a defined center, you have a process. You have a process. And I'm going to do another episode on defined channels, because when I say you have a process for, moving energy through that center, if it's colored in on your chart, that means you have a defined channel, a colored in line between two centers that moves energy through your system in a fixed, reliable, dependent way. And if you're wanting to, make updates in your life around your defined centers, diving into those channels that you're using, I think can help a lot in clarifying, like, how does my energy work? Where am I tripping myself up in having a rigid approach in handling this energy that doesn't work? Like, I still am approaching it in a way that, like, my emotion example, where I'm a very emotional person. I have emotions flowing through me always. And when I was little, there were consequences for having outbursts of emotions. So I learned how to minimize that discomfort for me. I didn't like it when I got in trouble for being emotional because I felt like I couldn't help it. So I figured out how to stuff that. And so, I mean, there could be, even though that's where it's harder for people to influence us, I think it's still possible to have learned behaviors in your fixed centers that you could learn different behaviors that would serve us better. So there's room for improvement across the board. And as always, being aware of how we're wired and how we're unique and what our unique system requires to function at its best, all of that is knowledge that empowers us to take better care of ourselves, to align ourselves with things that make sense for us. Like I said, like if you have a bunch of open centers and you're constantly around somebody who's negative and pointed in a negative direction, you're soaking that up every single time you spend time with them. And maybe it's worth looking at, like, is that really what I want to be doing? Like, I know that the cause and effect, I know the cause is that I spend time with this person, and the effect is that then I'm like, I have this yucky feeling energy bouncing around my body for the next 2 to 3 days. Like, I don't think I'm going to spend time with that friend anymore. Like, maybe that's a hard decision, but one that honors your system. And the more we know about our system, the easier it is to honor our system. So I hope this was helpful, as always. I have just fallen head over heels with human design, and I have lots of episodes carved out in my mind, things that I would love to bring through this forum, this podcast. I also wanted to take a moment and do a promo. If you are into human design, and at this point, if you've made it this far, I'm going to assume you are. I am doing a Zoom event on August 31st. That's a Tuesday at 11 a.m. I guess August 31st, 2021. For anybody listening in the future, this has already happened, but that's okay. I'm going to put a link in the description if you want to RSVP and come to that. It'll be at 11 a.m. Central Time on Zoom. Anybody is welcome. And it will also be recorded. So if you cannot make it, that's okay. But basically with the Zoom, it's nice because then I can use visuals in my explanation and I can point to specific things. So we can get a little bit more detailed. It's just a little bit easier to follow when you have the visual component as opposed to the podcast. So if that sounds like something fun, please feel free to join me on that Zoom event. The link is in the description for you to RSVP and check out some more human design episodes. Like I said, there's already a couple that are on from a few days ago, and there are more coming. So there will be more on here soon if there are not already. I think that's all I have for this episode though. So thank you once again for listening, and I hope you're enjoying the content that you find in this space and the overall vibe that you find in this space. I love coming into this recording space now that we've covered the energy centers and, you know, all of my open centers. I feel like I step into this space and I amplify this vibration of peace and love and self-acceptance and unconditional rightness of right here, right now in my life. And it feels like the ripple effects of amplifying this energy carry forward beyond this space. So I thank you for listening and for contributing. And until next time, dear friends, you take real good care of yourselves, and so will I.